We're now going to look at some potential security vulnerabilities in what we've already built, and we're going to address them now. So we're going to look at specifically at cross-site request forgery. And if you're unaware of what cross-site request forgery is, it's basically the ability to define parameters, perhaps either by get or post, and unwillingly a user who happens to be the victim will be not executing, but using these parameters on a page without their knowledge. Now, let me just give you an example of how this might work. So we've built our register.php file, we have validation, we have the ability to, not register a user yet, but the potential ability to register a user. Now, because of the way our input class works, and even if this wasn't how our input class worked, a user can still allow another user without them knowing to post or get variables to this or values to this page. Get is obviously a lot easier because in the case of that we can just pass in something like username equals Alex. And you typically find this problem on things like shopping carts, where you could say, for example, add item equals item, ID of 5 or something like that, and that would add that item to that user's basket. And without cross-site request forgery protection, that can happen. So unfortunately, at the moment in our application, we can actually define parameters in the URL, which you might think, that's a little bit dodgy, and it is. So we need a way to generate some kind of token to only allow data from this form to be posted to that to be posted back and interpreted by PHP. Now, if you're unsure about how this works or that explanation is a little bit confusing, carry on and we'll go through some of the different aspects of this in a moment. So we want to negate the ability to be able to do this. So how are we going to be able to do that? What can we do? Well, what we're going to be doing is building a token class, which allows us to first of all generate a token, and second of all check if a token is valid and exists, and then delete that token. So we're going to be generating a token for each refresh of the page, which only that page then knows. So another user somewhere else can't direct you to that page because the token will always be checked. So again, a little bit confusing, but let's go ahead and start building this. So the token needs to be generated inside of our form down here somewhere. So we need an input type of hidden with a name of token and a value of, well, this is where our class comes in. We need to be able to generate a token. So let's go ahead and build this token class. Now, we want a name of a token to be the same all the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to add this to our session config. So I'm going to say token, let's say token name equals token. Perfect. So we'll just call it token or CRFS token, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to call it token for now. So what we can do now is create a static method to generate a token for us. And what we're going to do is we are going to return session put token md5 unique ID, and that's it. But instead of token, we're going to use config get session token name. Now we also have this session class as well that we need to build. So we'll go ahead and build, and we'll go ahead and build that now, just so we we can use this. So if we go over to session. Okay, so we'll just build the put functionality because we don't want to worry about anything else just yet, because we'll go on to working with sessions in a moment. So let's go ahead and just create a public static function put, and we want to put something, a session name with a session value, and all this is going to do is it's going to return $_session name, and that's going to be equal to value. So it will return the value, or it will return the value of the session as well. We don't need to do this, but we'll do it anyway. So let's go ahead and get rid of that for now. We'll address the session class in the next part. So now we have the ability to put in a session. We can go ahead and actually start to look at this. So when we generate a token, this will be returned. What we now want to do is, inside of our register form, literally just say echo token generate. That will be returned to us because we are returning the value session put. That's why we returned it in our session class. We're returning a token that will be output there, and it will also be put into a session. So we have that in the user session that we can check. So let's go ahead and just view the source of the page, and you can see that we've got a token here. Now when I refresh, you can see that this value changes each time. So it's now unique to the users refreshing that page, and this will be updated in the users in the session to reflect this as well. So now that we've done this, we need the ability to check if a token exists or not. So we also need the ability to get a token from our session and check if it is the same as the token that's been defined in the form. So let's go ahead and create another method called check, and we want to pass in a token to check if this token exists in the session. If the token equals the session that's currently been applied, so the token that's been applied in the session, we want to then delete that session, return true if that's the case. So in this case, what we want to do is just quickly say token name equals config get session token name, and then we want to do a few things, which means we're actually going to need to change our session class a little bit. And let's go ahead and write this code before we actually do anything. So if session exists token name, and the token that we've supplied to this form is equal to session get token name, then we want to delete the session by token name, and we want to return true. Otherwise, we want to just return false if none of that works out. So we're checking if the session exists with the token name that we've defined in our config. We're then checking whether the token that's supplied to our check function or check method equals the session that's been stored by the user. So i.e., this basically just means, does this value that's defined as well as all of the other form data equal the session token that's been generated? And an attacker won't know this token because it's been generated uniquely by a user. So an attacker will not know this token value. Otherwise, we delete the session. So we need to introduce 3 more methods, not difficult methods to introduce at all. So let's just go ahead and do these. And let's get rid of our input class as well. So in session, we need the ability to check if a particular session exists. So let's put this at the top. Public static function exists. So to check if a session exists, we need to take a name, and we need to return is set token name. So if the token is set, true, otherwise return false. Simple as that. The next thing we need to do is the ability to delete a token. This will again be a static method. This will be delete. Okay, so we now want to also define a name, but we now want to refer back to whether this token actually exists or not, because we don't want to unset anything that doesn't exist. There's no need. So we can say if self exists name, then we want to unset $_session name. So we're basically unsetting it if it exists. fairly straightforward. And we also want the ability to get a particular value as well. And this is, again, extremely straightforward. This functionality doesn't really require that much PHP knowledge. It requires very basic PHP knowledge. All we're doing is abstracting it so it's a lot easier to deal with. So to get a value, we're just going to return $_session name. That's literally it. So now our token class and our session class can work together to pull in things, helpful things that we need. So what we haven't done now is checked here to see if our token is good or not. So what we're going to do is I'm going to say var dump token check, and on our register page, we're just going to be saying input get token. So what we're doing now is, let's just run through this because it is a tad confusing. We're grabbing the token from here, which has been set in a session already. So what we now have is, we have a token in our source of our form. So we have this token, and this token CA2 blah 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 ending in 59 is also set as a session for that user. What then happens is the user submits this form. We use token check to pass in the token that's been supplied by the form. What token check then does is checks if a session exists with this token that's been set, and that the token that we've supplied matches the session. So we're checking the token form in the form and the token in the session. If it does, we delete it because we don't need it anymore, and we return true. And that means that cross-site request forgery has failed. So let's go ahead and check this. There we go. I've supplied a username of Alex, and it says bool false. So we now know that the session has this has failed. So what we can now do is we can now incorporate this check into our the rest of our code. So what we can say is if else all the way down to here. Just indent this. In actual fact, no, we can get rid of this. We don't need to provide an alternative. We can just say if the token exists or the token matches, or if the token check passes, then we'll go ahead and do what we want to do. Oh, sorry, we'll need to do that inside of the class. Beg your pardon. So let's get rid of this, and if input exists, and then if token check input get token. Now, even if this input, this token here doesn't exist, this will still fail, and therefore this won't work. So now what I'm going to do is, using the same thing that we looked at earlier, is hit enter, oh yeah, of course, this has been input here. However, the rest of the code hasn't been run, and let's just quickly prove that. So I have been run. So I'm going to press enter, nothing happens. So despite the fact there is input available, nothing's been run. But when I click register, I have been run. And then we have our validation output that we've looked at before. So we now have the ability to not have input passed here, or in fact by post, because we require the register button to be hit on the page with the correct token there. So if this doesn't quite make sense, take a while to let this sink in and try and understand how this kind of works and why we do it. It is a concept that does take a little while to understand, but the fact that we're doing it really helps with security. It means that we can't, that cross-site request forgery is made a lot more difficult than it would be otherwise, because we're not protecting against it at all. So yeah, that's basically how we protect against cross-site request forgery. We've created our token class, utilizing some of the functionality in our session class, which we'll go on to next. And that's it. We've secured our application to another level. So we'll be using this token method or token class with its methods anywhere where we submit data in our application.